Welcome to the Pewtercast. Today is May 15th, 2016, and this is episode 2. I'm your host, Brent Allen, and guys, I am so excited to have you guys here. I am so excited to be back with you guys for episode 2. Turns out a little bit sooner than we thought. I had originally said that here in the off season, we were only going to be doing a show once a month. Well, here we are just a short 2 weeks after the first episode launched. And we have something else to talk about. We have some more news out there, and there's another topic that, as interactions started coming in from the first episode, that I said, hey, let's actually craft a whole episode around this. So we'll get into that in just a few minutes. But like I said, this is episode 2, and let me just say this. I am blown away by the response that we have received to episode 1. You guys have been amazing. And truly from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you guys so much for responding to this podcast. It is beyond my wildest dreams of what we've seen happen. And one of the things that I promised those of you who sent me a message that if it was good or really at least entertaining, I would read it on air. So here's a few that came in from this last week. At Headlines or Bust says, really good listen, hope to hear more. Can't wait for it to be on iTunes. Also, hope you do weekly episodes during the season. 2 thumbs up. I don't know who you are, Headlines or Bust, but thank you so much. And certainly we will be doing one weekly during the season, and we'll see what happens here during the off season. At Bucks Football says, just got done listening to the At the Pewtercast podcast. Really good work. Check it out, Bucks fans. Check mark. That's awesome. Dan says, just listened to the first episode last night. Good listen. Hope you get around to more. Keep up the good work. Bucks fan from Scotland. You guys hear that? We're international. Awesome. Dan, thank you so much for listening. Tuning in all the way from over in Scotland. Although, you know, from what I understand, the Bucks have a pretty good fan base over in England. And so hopefully that's where a little bit of this is coming from. And hey, I'd love to hear a lot more of my English brethren out there. My family is descended, and I'm very proud of it, from England. In fact, there's still a lot of my family there in England right now, which hopefully one day I'll get over there to check out. But that is not what this particular podcast is about. All right, I've got one more. A guy named Ryan says, enjoyed the podcast, though I'm worried about so much positivity about our team. Oh my gosh, looking forward to more in the year ahead. And that one makes me laugh. Because, you know, certainly, Ryan, I think you have every right to be worried about so much positivity about our team. But, guys, this is just a positive time, I think, in the history of our Bucks. This is one of the more positive preseasons, or not preseasons, off seasons, I guess, that I can think of in a long while. You know, I think every year we go into a season with high hopes. We expect that good things are going to happen. And this year, I just think we've got some really amazing things that are happening around the Tampa Bay Buccaneers organization, and I can't wait to see how that plays out on the field here in the year ahead and in the years ahead. So, and guys, I think I'm going to go ahead and plug this here. I want to say this. Thanks to everyone who sent in messages. I love hearing from you guys. I love getting your feedback, and it's super encouraging for me to hear that. And if you'd like to go ahead and get in touch with me, there's a few ways you can do that. You can shoot me an email to thepewtercast@gmail.com. You can catch up with me on Facebook or Twitter at thepewtercast, or facebook.com/thepewtercast. Twitter is actually at thepewtercast. Just a little bit of a correction from last week, or last episode. I said a few times that the Twitter account, there was no "the" in the name. I was trying to save you guys a few letters. And I got to tell you, I'm not really sure why the Twitter handle actually came out with the word "the" in it, because I was trying to make that a very deliberate decision, and I honestly don't remember putting "the" in there, but that is how it came out. And you know, I started thinking about it, and I said, you know, every other avenue has the word "the" in it, so let's not change it. Let's not add confusion. It's only 3 letters. Let's just go ahead and let it be. So our Twitter account is at thepewtercast, and just like I said to these guys last episode, I'll say it again. If you send me something and it's good or at least mildly entertaining, we're going to read it on air and we'll talk about it. So those were just a few. We've got some more that might come up here in a little bit, or maybe even on another episode. Here's the thing, coming off of episode 1. I'm not really entirely sure what I thought the response was going to be. I think mostly I thought that it was just going to be crickets. I really did. I thought that I'd kind of put it out there. There might be a few click-throughs, not much, if any, real interaction on social media or on the website, especially at this particular point in the season where not much is really happening. But here's what happened. All right, you guys ready for this? Listen to this. Within the first 24 hours, we had over 200 downloads of the podcast. 24 hours, we had over 200. And by the way, this podcast is not on iTunes yet. It's not on Stitcher. It's not on Jabbercast. It's not on Podcast Addict. It's not on any of those just yet. This was just people who clicked through a link that got sent out on Twitter or got sent out on Facebook, and they went back, and in 24 hours, we had over 200 downloads of the podcast. We got, in the first 24 hours, 50-plus followers on Twitter. I had received 3 emails. We had over 3 dozen direct mentions on Twitter. We had a bunch of new Facebook pages, or a bunch of new likes on the Facebook page. And I actually got requests from you guys to put the podcast out to 4 different platforms. And guys, here's the thing. All of that was within the first 24 hours. Now, we've been out there right now about 2 weeks. And the one that really, I think, means the most to me, it was the 200 downloads. The 200 downloads. The only way to get it is through the link. And people downloaded it over 200 times. I am blown away. And it's continued to be played throughout the week. That number has grown over the couple of weeks. I am blown away. And so once again, all that I can say to you guys is thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, I don't know what's considered good for new podcasts and for metrics that people really use, but this one blew away every expectation that I had. So thank you guys. You guys absolutely make it all worth it. And I couldn't wait to get back on the microphone. So we started kind of looking at what episode 2 should have been. Certainly almost right on the heels of releasing episode 1. Kind of started thinking about what could the next episode be about. And I'd gone back and forth over it. For the longest time, the leading idea had been, since the idea of episode 1 focused on the draft, that maybe episode 2 should focus on undrafted free agents and maybe track them through minicamp and those things that were happening. It kind of seemed poetic to me, I guess, that way. A nice way to round out the opening 2 episodes. But there was a problem with that. I'm not in Tampa. I can't go out and watch camp. I can't go out and meet these guys, and there's a lot of them. And then I realized that in order to get enough info for the podcast, basically all that I would be doing is just retreading what other Bucks media outlets out there have already done. Plus, there were only 7 draft picks. There are 19 undrafted free agents and another 15 or so that are there at tryouts. It looks like the Bucks have kept 3 of those tryout guys, so that brings the number of undrafted free agents up to 21. And guys, that's just a lot. And in addition to that, I then probably have to speculate on who makes the roster and who doesn't, and that starts feeling a whole lot like speculating on a mock draft. And if you listen to episode 1, then you probably know how I feel about mock drafts. So all of that to say, I opted out of that topic for episode 2, and I really just wanted to wait and see who we had more clarity on, who our undrafted free agents were going to be going into the season, and maybe we'll discuss those guys when that gets a little more landed. It's just too much up in the air and too much speculating and just a lot out there with those guys. So what are we going to talk about? Well, I kind of referenced this a little bit earlier in the show. I thought that we would take this episode while we're kind of here in the off season and address some issues that honestly we probably won't get to cover much once the season hits, because once the season hits, we're going to be reviewing the game that we just played. We'll be maybe we'll be previewing the upcoming game. We'll be looking at some other things that are happening. We won't be able to talk about some of these other topics that really affect and impact the team. And that's really what the offseason is for, right? To work on stuff you might not get to once the season hits, to kind of get the fundamentals straight and get those out of the way. And so with that said, there was something that I had mentioned in the first episode that got a few remarks from people this week. I got an email about it and some other things, and I thought it'd be good to dive more into that. I had mentioned that the Bucks were going through the process of changing their culture, specifically in going from a culture of losing that we have now and changing it into a culture of winning. And so, guys, I'm going to go ahead and warn you, substantively, this is going to feel a lot different than last week's episode. But I think I think the topic is vital for Bucs fans, and therefore it is vital for us as fans to understand and to rally behind. So that will be our main topic for today. Guys, and then after that, we'll get into the PewterCast Top 5, and in honor of the undrafted free agents, I couldn't forget them all together in this podcast. So for that Top 5, we're going to talk about our top 5 undrafted free agents who have played for the Bucs. And then we're going to round out the show with a bit of Bucs in the news. There were some very interesting articles that came out this week, and I can't wait to dive into them. So, guys, this should be a good show for you. Stay tuned to the PewterCast.
I've been trying to figure out a way to articulate all this for 20 years, and I still can't do it. The complexities are incredible of what it takes, and there's an old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. To win a Stanley Cup the way we did, it obviously took a tremendous amount of people to be involved, not only from the organization, but outside. And if you just look behind us, could we have won the Stanley Cup without JD? Maybe not. Could we have won it without Sam? Could we have won it without anybody? Maybe not. Maybe because the frequency would have been changed. I mean, it gets to be that fine-tuned of everybody being involved on a day-to-day basis and living together. And then you bring in the momentum from the fans and from the incredible generations of people around it to come in and really kind of understand what the team is trying to accomplish. And collectively, you build momentum. And I think what everybody's trying to articulate here, and as Joey so eloquently did, maybe a little unconventional, I think what we're trying to say is that you can't do this without creating a culture. And there's a great saying that culture before strategy. You can have all the strategy, you can have all the talks, you can have all the leadership, but if you don't create culture, none of it matters. And I think what happened that particular year is that we nailed culture. And I think the fans understood it, the team understood it, and everything else blossomed because of it. And here we sit 20 years later, still trying to tell the story, and so many different stories, and it's forever. It's forever, and thank you all for your part that you played in it, because without you, we probably couldn't have done it either. So here we are.
Welcome back to episode 2 of the PewterCast. So guys, our main topic today is all about culture. What does it take for us as a Bucs organization to change our culture? Guys, I would argue that culture in just about any arena of life trumps individual talent. I think that is also true in the football arena. So what's the difference? What makes the difference between players that go out and seem to make an impact and players that wind up with Super Bowl rings on their fingers and the ones who don't? Well, it's going to be culture. It's the culture of that particular team, of that particular organization. Why is it you can have a fantastic player who never gets a ring? It's the atmosphere of the organization that they are playing in. How often have we seen a mediocre player change teams and suddenly they begin to shine? How often have we seen good players switch teams and really not be able to perform anymore? I believe that the difference is culture. Those are players that are examples of moving from a bad culture to a good culture or vice versa. And it can take people out. I believe that culture trumps ability so often. And as Mark Messier said in the clip that we played leading into the segment, culture must come before strategy. A player can make or break a game. A coach can make or break a season. But culture can make or break a team for decades and decades. So what kind of culture do we as the Bucs have? Well, guys, it really pains me to say, but the reality is what it is. And let's face it, we have a culture of losing. That has been the culture that we have existed in for at least the last 10 years. That was the culture that existed around our organization from its inception in 1976 for the first 20 years up till about 1996. It was a culture of losing. We had become accustomed to it. We had almost expected to lose. And it's hard for me to talk about those first 20 years because I wasn't a Bucs fan then, but I have been certainly for these last 20 years. And I can't stand it anymore. Can you stand it? I can't stand it anymore. And guys, really, I think in the history of the Bucs, with the exception of that decade in the mid to late 90s to the early 2000s, we have had a culture of losing on this team and really in this fan base. A losing culture always finds a way to lose games that they should be winning. Does that sound familiar? Losing cultures wander from one quick fix to another trying to find an answer. They say, oh, we just need a new coach, or oh, we need a new GM. Oh, we need a new franchise quarterback. Oh, we need new owners. And we jump from person to person to person to person into a group of people trying to bring about a change. And what we don't realize is that the answer is not a person. What we need is a change in culture. Sure, we need people. We need good people. And it is people who will bring about a change in culture, but it is what those people are bringing that is bigger than themselves that matters. It's those things that can last far long after they've stopped playing or far long after they've stopped being a part of our organization. It's a winning culture, and that's what we need. So how do we get it? How do we see Jason Licht and Dirk Koetter doing? Why is it that Jameis is so important in this equation? Where are Gerald McCoy and Levante David in this picture? In other words, what are the components of building a winning culture for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? And how is it that we could be in the middle of doing this already? You see, guys, I believe that for every organization, every football team, and for the Bucs, there are what I call 5 components. They're non-negotiables for building a culture of winning that is not just going to win 8 games, which is what people have said they expect us to hit at least 500 this year. We'll win 8 games, and we'll be happy with Dirk Koetter's first year. I'm not happy with 8 games. I don't know about you guys. I'm not. I don't want to win 8 games. I want to win not just a majority of our games. I want to win the vast majority of our games. I would love to see us go 16-0. Is that a reality? Probably not. Go 12-4. I think that's absolutely doable. I think that's absolutely go 11-5. That's a great season. I'm good with that. I think it's good sometimes for teams to lose individual games. It teaches them a lot. But I want to see us win the vast majority of our games. Winning the vast majority of our games gets us into the playoffs. Eventually, that gets us into the Super Bowl, and we bring home a championship. There are 5 components for our team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, to become relevant again in the NFL. 5 have-to-haves that will force ESPN and NBC and CBS and Fox to put the games on more nationally broadcast games. So you guys ready? That's what we're going to dive into a little bit today. We're going to talk about these 5 components of what it's going to take to build a culture of winning at One Buc Place, to build a culture of winning in Raymond James Stadium, to build a culture of winning around the Tampa Bay Buccaneers organization, to build a culture of winning around us as a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan base. And the first thing we have to have, guys, is you have to have a clear vision. There's a great saying that says, where there is no vision, people perish. And guys, that is something that we as a fan base have been experiencing. We have far too long been wandering around without a clearly articulated, clearly spoken vision. If there has been a vision of what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers should be, it's not really been communicated. We kind of get the it's to, go win a Super Bowl. That's not a vision, okay? It's got to be more than just win a Super Bowl. What does coming to work every day at the organization look like? How are we speaking to each other? How are we responding to each other? How are we filling in for each other's blind spots? How's the camaraderie on our team? That is a vision that needs to be articulated. That is a vision that needs to be said, and it needs to be said concisely and often. You have to know what you're trying to build, and you have to be able to communicate that. This is why businesses spend gobs and gobs and gobs of money every year trying to hash out new mission statements and vision statements, and so that they can not only figure out what they're about, but be able to communicate to their customers and to their teammates what their mission is or what their vision is going to be. Now, guys, I'll tell you this. I think Jason Licht has a vision for how this team looks, and it's beginning with him. I don't really, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but I don't really think Team Glazer really gets it and really sees it, and that's why they're so hands-off. But we have to have a vision for what this team is not only going to do, but for how it's going to look. So that's the first thing. You have to have a clear vision that's got to be articulated. The second component to having a culture of winning is that you have to have a roadmap for how to get there. Bill Hybels, an incredible leader, says that leadership is the ability to move people from here to there. All right, let me say that again. The leadership is the ability to move people from here to there. And the biggest part of that is the move. You know where here is, you know where there is. It's the move that is the hard part. You know, we know why here sucks and why we can't stay here. If you have a vision, you know where you want to go and why that's awesome. But how do we get there? You have to have a plan. You know, Lovey, when he was around, he often talked about, even after his firing, that they had a plan for where they were going. He said, well, I thought there was a plan. I thought we were working the plan. And he was headed in a certain direction, but it didn't work out. And I do think out of that, Jason Licht not only has a vision, but he has a plan for how to get there and for, in the process, for us to be competing. I think Dirk Koetter is a part of that plan, and I think Dirk Koetter is really a fellow architect of that plan. I think he is a guy who is coming in, who sees the vision that Jason Licht has really cast out there, and Dirk Koetter has helped provide some of that roadmap for how to get there, and that Jason looks at Dirk and sees this is a guy that can help take our team there. Now, guys, some of the other things about this roadmap is it's going to include things like we have to fill out the roster with some less outspoken but still incredibly valuable players. This is where people like Gerald McCoy and Levante David come in. Not everyone is a leader out front. Some people set an example in their actions and hold each other up by the sheer level of their play and their commitment. These guys are action-oriented, not word-oriented people. And that's who Gerald McCoy and Levante David are. They're not those people who are going to go out and pull people with them. They're going to go out and be the workhorses and to show people how it should be done. And that's kind of how they lead out, but that doesn't mean that they're leaders. Does that make sense? So that's one piece. Another piece of it is I think that retaining your players is a key piece of that roadmap. You don't want to be constantly instilling values and a love of the Bucks into a new group of people every single year. I think this is one of the problems with another team that I'm very much a fan of, the Kentucky Wildcats, particularly the basketball program, which is very famous for its one and done program. And, you know, for as often as Coach Cal has the number one recruiting class and he brings in these great players, as you see, it's not until these players decide to stick around for a second or even a third year that the team really begins to gel and to materialize into something truly great. It takes that kind of time. And if you constantly have this revolving door of people, you're never going to be able to get traction with where you're trying to go. So you have to be able to retain your key players. I think a big piece of the roadmap is that you have to build into your culture the love of being a Buccaneer. You have to build in loyalty to your organization. That's a huge one. You know, listen, these guys all know that this is a business. So often what you see is they kind of keep an emotional distance from their team because truthfully, next year they could be on a different team. Next week, even, they could be on a different team. But as a player, to build a culture, you have to be able to break past that. Yes, it is a business, but in this particular organization, in this particular team, we are more than that. Now, the business is how we do that, but who we are as a group is more than that. And you have to get people who buy into that and people who become loyal to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It can become a very, very, very valuable part of creating a culture that you've had to envision and carefully create a roadmap for how to get there. So that's the second one. So the first one, you have to have a clear vision of where you're going, what your team is going to look like, how things are going to happen within your organization. You need a roadmap for how to get there. You need a plan, because you can't just flip the switch overnight. Switching a culture takes a long time to do that. And those are the first two pieces. I think the third piece, the third component, the third have to have, in order to change your culture from a culture of losing to a culture of winning, this one should seem obvious. You have to have an expectation of winning. You have to expect to win. This seems like a really simple statement to say that teams that win find a way to win. They're the teams that say we're not losing this one, and they go out and they make it happen. They find a way to make the play. These are teams, because every team's going to find a spot where they're up against the wall. They're going to find themselves on the wrong end of the scoreboard, on the wrong end of the losing side of the scoreboard from time to time, and they're going to look up and they're going to have to find a way to win. Teams that win are not just teams that go out and dominate every single game and it's never really a contest. We need a team that's going to be in the thick of it, a team that's going to earn its win. And when a team can find this, when they have this expectation to win, this is something that is going to surpass the talent alone. Okay? This is something that is going to be more important than just the talent of the people on your team. Losing to these guys should be just as big of a shock to the team as if something like a UFO came out of the sky and started blowing up the White House. Losing should not be commonplace. If they lose, they should be going back into the locker room, shaking their heads, trying to figure out what the hell just happened. How did we lose this? I don't understand. They should not understand what is going on. It shouldn't be something that is passed off. Well, in this league, you win some, you lose some. They're a really good team. So, next week we just got to get back at it and we got to practice more. And we just can do it. And then we go out and grab a steak dinner that night. You can't do that. Losing, it's going to be something that's going to have to eat at you every time you lose. That's going to cause you to get in there and work harder. That's what losing should have to do, because you expected to win. You expected to win going out on that field, and you knew you were going to. And every time you take the field, you expect that. And that's not just a decision you can make. Well, today I'm going to expect to win. No, you truly have to believe it. You have to know that your team is that good. This is the reason why I don't understand for the life of me why Tim Tebow is not playing in the NFL right now. The only thing I can come up with is that people are kind of turned off by his religious nature, which I don't think is a great reason. I mean, yeah, it's a little bit of a spectacle, and I can understand why it might be annoying to some people. And yeah, he may have an ugly throw, and yeah, he's kind of quirky. But let me tell you what about Tim Tebow. The guy's a winner. Because even though he may not be technically great at his position, he always finds a way to win. Unlike a guy like Josh McCown. Did everybody remember him? Yeah, we remember him. The Browns sure remember Josh McCown. He is not a guy who finds a way to win. He's a guy who has a certain level of talent. It's a level of talent that was good enough to become a part of the NFL. And over his years, he has gone from a couple of different teams to become their new starting quarterback. So there is a level of talent that he has. But Josh McCown is not a guy who finds a way to win, not like Tebow. Do you guys remember when Tebow was with the Broncos? The number of games that they pulled out of the air, and he wound up taking them into the playoffs that year. And you go back and you look at the Browns, who had McCown last year. They're kind of the poster child for what a culture of losing looks like. And it seems like they don't even understand this principle. They chose McCown, who they watched what McCown did with Tampa Bay the year before, over a guy like Tebow. That is beyond me. You have to go with the guy who finds a way to win over the guy who has a prettier throw, don't you? I mean, the guy who has a track record from college and in the pros of he just found a way to win. It made no sense whatsoever. He'd throw up ugly throws. He would put out these ridiculous Hail Mary passes, and it would work. And they'd catch the ball, and they'd score the points, and they would come out the winners on the team. Jameis is a guy who expects to win. He's a guy who will do what it takes. Remember that amazing play last year against the Falcons? Yes, you do. I don't even have to describe the play to you because you know exactly which one I'm talking about. It's the play. It's the play where he refused to go down until he had us to the yard line that we needed to be at. Jameis not only understands this principle of expecting to win, he embodies it. He expects us to win. He expects himself to win. And that attitude can and is, I believe, catching fire around the Tampa Bay organization. And it's finding its way and becoming a part of the team culture. Because you see, not just one person can believe that. Everybody has to believe that. The majority of your people have to believe that in order for that to become a part of your culture. And I think that's something that we're seeing happening is we're going to expect to win as we come out on Sundays. So that's number 3. Number 4, guys, is you have to have a unified core that's team first. All right, I'm going to talk about something that I hate talking about. The Patriots. The Patriots. Tom freaking Brady. But you know what? Love them, hate them, like them, leave them, whatever. They are perennial winners. They are. Now, that you may call them cheaters, you may not call them cheaters, but they do win. And you know why they win? Because Tom Brady, the leader of that team, has been there long enough, and he has established a core of players around him where they are together in this to make the Patriots the greatest team that's out there. They are a core. Tom Brady is a guy who takes a pay cut to allow the team to have more room in their salary cap so they can bring in other guys. And Tom Brady is wildly underpaid as an elite level NFL quarterback that he is. Now, make no mistake, Tom Brady's still making his money. You know, he's still making his bank, but he's not making as much as some of these other guys is. And you know why? Because he believes in the team first, and he's taking a cut to allow them to bring in other people around him. And he's a team first guy. And that kind of an attitude, that kind of a culture will spread through a locker room. And you look around the Patriots team, it's not that they have the freshest, best talent on the team. I mean, they do have talent. But more than that, they have a culture that is contagious, and they find themselves a part of it. Okay, I got to quit talking about the Patriots. It's getting me riled up. Let's talk about something more pleasant. Let's talk about what I call the golden era of Bucs history. You know that team, that mid-90s to early 2000s. Yeah, that team. Let's talk about that. Guys, this is the thing that comes to my mind when I think of that era. Sure, we had free agents that kind of came and went every year. We never really had our quarterback situation figured out. Shout out to Sean King. But we never had that fully landed and figured out for years and years and years and years on end. There were people who came in and just played for a paycheck. There was a whole other group that stayed for the long haul, and then there were people who kind of shuffled through that deck and were somewhere in between. Those are the people who loved the Buccaneers. They couldn't imagine playing anywhere else. This is the group that I'm talking about. You know who it is. It was Derek Brooks. It was Rondé Barber, Mike Allstott, Warren Sapp. And I know you may say, hey, well, wait a minute. He played a bunch of his career somewhere else. But you know what? When he went into the Hall of Fame, he went in as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. There's just a ton of them that was the core of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. And they were there every single year. They loved the Bucs. They were unified with each other. You couldn't shake these brothers apart. They did, and they still do own the team. Did you hear Booger McFarland when he announced the Noah Spence pick? Here, let me play it for you.
With the 39th pick in the 2016 NFL Draft, my Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Noah Spence, linebacker, Eastern Kentucky.
Did you hear it? Did you hear it? Did you? He said, my Tampa Bay Buccaneers. His Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's his team. Booger McFarland hasn't played for almost 10 years now, and it's still his Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He owns it. He identifies with it. He loves the team, and even though he doesn't play anymore, he still owns the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's what it means that they are a team first. I believe that is something that is building right now around the organization. You see people like Gerald McCoy, who has signed on for a long-term contract. Levante David, who has signed in. Jameis Winston is a guy who is going to be about his team first. And those are the kind of attitudes. This is where Gerald McCoy and Levante David are so valuable to the team. They're so valuable to what we have going on. It's why I think the re-signing of Doug Martin was so important, because he's now coming back. He's committed to Tampa Bay. And, if some of these other guys stay, the Mike Evans and the Quan Alexanders, the O-line guys, those guys all stay. They become a part of this core. It's why signing, I think, Hargraves was so important, where he is a Tampa Bay guy. He loves the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He wanted to play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and now he is. We have guys on our team now who are becoming unified team-first players. And when the core has it, it will spread out to the other players, and they will then spread out to the fans, because that's what happens when a culture changes. It's contagious. It spreads. Okay, so number 5, guys, the last one. The first have to have we talked about was having a clear vision, and then we talked about having to have a roadmap for how to get there. We also talked about that in order to have a culture of winning, you have to have an expectation to win. And then we talked about you have to have a unified core of your team that is team first, that is all about their team. And the last thing that I think you have to have in order to have a culture of winning is you have to have people. You have to have individuals that are leaders who are setting the bar. Now, let me say this about leaders. Not everyone can or should be a leader. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work if everyone tries to be a leader. Now, everyone can lead at times. Everyone can lead out in a different area, but they're not necessarily the leaders. The leaders will always be leading no matter what's going on. And guys, that's a lot of what I'm talking about. Leaders will set the bar for the team. Some things they'll set the bar in the action on the field. And this is really where you see Levante David and Gerald McCoy shine. These guys may not be as outspoken as, say, a Quan or a Jameis, but they show up and they put a hurting on the other people, and they're setting the bar high for how you're expected to execute your position. And because they're executing their position so well, other people see that and they rise to that level of play. And that's where leaders are setting the bar. Leaders set the bar in discipline. You guys think about Jameis. This is where players are showing up for an extra workout. These are where players are staying after practice to run extra drills. These are where you see the guys in the offseason who come back leaner and stronger and faster. Thinking about Doug Martin last year and the incredible year he had, because he went out and he set the bar in discipline during the offseason. You guys, we've all seen pictures of Jameis. Jameis is kind of showing off his new body, so to speak. He's trimmed down quite a bit and put on a bit of muscle. It's the discipline he's had here in the offseason. These are the guys that are watching more tape than there should be hours in the day. They're leading out in discipline and doing the things that it takes to be a winner. Leaders also set the bar in words. They say one thing, and then it's backed up with how they behave and what they do. Again, let's look at Jameis. Remember last year, and I can't even remember who the player was, and if I had time, I'd go look it up, but I don't. He got a stupid penalty. It was just a dumb penalty that cost the Bucs something, and that player was visibly upset. And the cameras caught Jameis. He kind of went up to that guy. Neither one of them had helmets on, and Jameis just pulled the guy in close, and the guy was still, you could see he was just visibly pissed at himself mostly. And Jameis just starts talking to him. And I'm not sure what he said, but he probably talked to him for a solid 30, 45 seconds. And the guy who got the penalty didn't say a word. He just listened and he stewed. And guys, but Jameis sat there and he built him up. And you could tell that he was saying things like, hey, man, you've got to shake that off. You've got to get back out there. Hey, listen, everybody has a mistake. It's how you bounce back from it. He was saying leadership type stuff. And you could see how that just changed the guy, because I remember this guy, he went back out in the next series and he did really, really well. He did amazing. Leaders lead out in the words that they say. They lead out in how you interact and how you behave with the other people on your team. That's what leaders lead out in doing. The last thing I want to talk about, leaders set the bar in spreading the culture. They embody the culture themselves, and they set the bar in spreading that out to other people and kind of spreading that DNA. And don't take this anywhere gross. I don't mean for it to be that way. But they're spreading that DNA, the DNA of the culture around them. Again, at the end of last season, remember Jameis's end of the season press conference? He defined the reality of how the Bucs were living. They said, listen, some of these people don't want to win as much as other people want to win in this team. They just don't. He said he was calling out the bad culture of the team and saying he wasn't going to stand for that. There was even a report, I think it was Lovey who actually said that Jameis was sitting at his locker in just disbelief, saying he had never lost 10 games in his entire life cumulatively, like they had just lost 10 games there in his first season in the NFL. And he wasn't going to have it again. You could see it in his face. Even Jason Light stood up and he said that he would never have another top 10 pick in the draft as long as he's a GM here at Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That is part of what it means to spread the culture. They're verbally talking about it. They're putting that out there so other people can hear it. They're allowing other people to hear it and to embrace it and embody it and to own that culture for themselves. And so I love what I'm seeing. I think our team is on the way to crafting a new culture. And we're already in the process of that. And this is going to be an exciting season to me to watch as that culture continues to get rebuilt. Guys, culture is so important because it's contagious. Culture is the key to long-term, sustained success on the football field. Guys, the truth is, the Bucs have held on to a culture of losing for over a decade now. But I do believe with all my heart that culture is shifting, and if it doesn't get stymied, we could be on the precipice of an amazing next decade as Bucs fans. So now I ask you guys, what do you think? I'd love to know your thoughts on my thoughts. I do respond to every piece of email or social media interaction that we get, and who knows, if it's something particularly good or even mildly entertaining, I may read it on the next show. So shoot me an email. I'd love to know your thoughts at thepewtercast@gmail.com. You can get in touch with me on Twitter at thepewtercast or on facebook.com. Remember, with the Twitter, it is at thepewtercast, as it is with all of our other things with email and Facebook. Well, guys, be sure to stay with us because coming up next, we've got our top 5 list this week where we're going to be talking about the best undrafted free agents. Some of these guys have even become a part of the culture of the Buccaneers when it's at its best. I'll be right back. Hey, it's Brent Allen, host of the show. Do you want to be a sponsor? I mean, this would be a great place to advertise to Buccaneers fans, don't you think? I think so. This is a good spot. You know, it's deep in the podcast. People are listening. It's now a break from the show just a little bit. And I got to tell you guys, I know we're going to be getting thousands upon thousands upon thousands of listeners. Or maybe tens upon tens. I'm not really sure. Hey, listen, if you're listening to this and you're interested in becoming a sponsor, whether you've got your own podcast of your own or you just want to sponsor some stuff that you think people that listen to a podcast about Buccaneers would also be interested in, if you're interested, just drop me a line and let's talk about you becoming a sponsor of the show. We'd love to have that conversation with you. All right, and welcome back to the Pewtercast. I'm Brent Allen, your host, and guys, it is time for our top 5 segment of the week. And today, guys, we are going to be talking about the top 5 Buccaneers that were undrafted free agents. Now, the reason I'm going with this is, as I mentioned in the upfront of the show, I had originally planned on doing a show all about the undrafted free agents, and since that's kind of the season and the era that we're in right now, I couldn't bypass the season and completely ignore those guys. But it really got me thinking, who were some of the best undrafted free agents that the Bucs have ever had? So I had some criteria that I set up as I was looking at this. First criteria was they had to enter the league as an undrafted free agent, but they didn't necessarily have to enter the league with the Bucs. You know, they could have been a later acquisition for Tampa Bay, but they were people who were not drafted at all. I also tried to keep this list to people that I actually saw play from 1998 and on. And the reason I did that is because these lists tend to be fairly subjective. I'm sure there are people out there who could tell me about plenty of undrafted free agents from prior to 1998, which is when I became a Bucs fan. And I'm sure they're fantastic people. I just can't comment on them because I haven't watched that much old game film to really know who's who. And so there's that. The other thing was I did not require that the undrafted free agents finish their career with the Bucs. They could have moved on, but these had to be players who came in and made a difference and made an impact within the Buccaneers organization for the time that they were here. And just the qualification that they were undrafted free agents as they came in to the league. Now, one thing, guys, I do have to acknowledge Scott Smith over at Buccaneers.com. He had an article where he ranked his top 10 undrafted free agents that I didn't find until I kind of started researching this segment. I didn't know that he had done something similar to this. And I'm really thankful that he did, because I had to reference that article a lot in researching this segment. Because as it turns out, it's kind of hard to find anywhere a list of undrafted free agents that have played for any specific team. So Scott's article was a tremendous help in kind of narrowing down those guys and cycling down those guys. And I would recommend to you guys that you go over to Buccaneers.com and read his full article on his top 10 undrafted free agents. And I'm going to do my best in this to have my own thoughts about these guys. Although I will tell you, facts are just facts, and facts tend to speak for themselves. So if there's a little bit of crossover between what I'm about to say and what he said, that's what it is it's really more the facts just speaking for themselves. So, all right, guys, here we go. My number 5 pick for one of the top undrafted free agents that played for the Bucs is I'm going with a guy who is no longer a Buck. But he was one of my favorite guys, and he is the guy, the only guy that I cheer for when I'm watching the Patriots. Because no matter what, this guy is still a Tampa Bay Buccaneer to me, although he probably doesn't consider himself to be. I still do. And I am talking about LeGarrette Blount. Here's what I remember most about him is the excitement that he brought his rookie season with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which was in 2010. And it really seemed to me like he was going to be a part of the resurgence of a team that we loved in 2010, that we had some kind of good starts going on there. We kind of had some what I call false starts happening in those mid-years. And, that first year he took off for over 1,000 yards, which, ain't too shabby for an undrafted free agent. And ultimately he wound up taking a backseat to Doug Martin when he came in 2012. And I can't really blame the coaches for doing that, but to me, LeGarrette Blount stands out as, in my memory, as one of my favorite players to watch. Maybe because 2010 was the first time I ever actually tried playing fantasy football, and he racked me up some mad crazy points that year, if I remember correctly. Or maybe not, I don't really know. But I liked him, and I still root for him as a player. I still root for him as the guy. And I'm glad to see him still playing and winning Super Bowls, even if it is really with that other team. So my number 5 pick is LeGarrette Blount. All right, my number 4 pick. This one is probably going to come as a surprise to most people, especially after last year. But this is one guy that I like a whole lot, and I'm talking about Mr. Bobby Rainey. I remember when Bobby Rainey first literally burst onto the scene with Tampa Bay. And what I remember most is the commenters talking about he was literally just picked up off the streets. And the way they talked about it, it kind of made it sound to me like he was literally walking around Tampa and somehow he became a part of the team. Okay, well, that's not true because he was actually first signed in 2012, which was the same rookie year as Doug Martin, as an undrafted free agent, and he went with the Ravens. He eventually wound up with the Browns in 2013 and then finally got picked up by Tampa after getting released by the Browns. And Bobby came in, this guy who was off the street, and he was from Western Kentucky, which me being from Kentucky made me happy, even though I'm more of a Wildcat fan than I am a Hilltopper fan. I still love my home state schools. He became especially highlighted to me because that was the year that Doug Martin had gotten hurt in 2013, as did Mike James. And Bobby Rainey really just came in and seemed to pick up right where Doug had left off. Doug was kind of having a down year, as it were, and Bobby came in, and it's like he just went with, he was the reincarnated Doug Martin for me for the rest of that year. I loved watching him play, and I wanted to just see them continue to get the ball in Bobby's hands more. And he did. He had several flashy games. he was in my mind a running back that was a secret weapon for the Bucs that no one could ever game plan for because they didn't see him coming. Of course, we all know how the last couple of years have turned out. Bobby, he's a guy that I always liked, and I was really happy for him last year when he landed a job of a full-time returner. But dang it, those drop balls. Oh, man. And, of course, Bobby has since moved on to the Giants now, and I really wish him all the success in the world as long as he isn't playing the Bucs, in which case I hope we beat his ass. So Bobby Rainey is my number 4 pick for one of our top, at least one of my favorite undrafted free agents. All right, number 3 on my list is a guy who went undrafted, signed as a free agent with the Vikings, and then Tampa came in and stole him off their practice squad. I personally love the fact that we did that, and I'm talking about Mr. Donald Penn. Once he got his chance to start here in 2007, he wound up starting for 108 games consecutively for Tampa. That's a lot of seasons, people. That's a lot of work that he's put in. And that's pretty good for a guy who came in as an undrafted free agent that we stole from another team. That's awesome. And I got to tell you, what keeps Donald Penn from being higher on my list was that, yes, he was good enough to start for so many years in a row for Tampa. And even once he was released from Tampa, he was actually picked up by the Raiders and he started the next 16 games. So he is a man who clearly has talent. He is a man who is good enough to be a starter in the NFL, but he was also a part of just some really abysmal years in Tampa Bay. And I am in no way, shape, or form blaming those years on him. In fact, I'd say without him, those years probably could have been even more abysmal. Truthfully, it's never going to be an offensive lineman who leads the team to glory on the football field. But given the time, and even given the fact that he was there, I never felt like the O-line was solid. I just sort of felt like it was there, like it was serviceable. Donald Penn was great. He was reliable, but it didn't seem to translate to the rest of the team. And so that's why Donald is really staying here in this middle section for me as the number 3, although he is a terrific player. Okay, I want you guys to catch that. He is a really good player. Yeah, and that's why he makes my number 3 pick for the best undrafted free agent. All right, my number 2 pick for undrafted free agents, best as a Buccaneer, I'm going with Mr. Ernest Graham, or a guy who was cleverly coined as Mr. August by our former coach, Chucky John Gruden. And he makes my list because this is a guy who came in and played whatever position we asked him to play, and he did it well, whether he was on special teams or he was a running back or he was a halfback. And he was the kind of player that, honestly, I forgot until doing the research for this spot that he was not a part of our Super Bowl team. He just always felt like a guy who was to me. I was a little surprised by that. I thought he was a part of that Super Bowl team, but no, he wasn't. And I was trying to figure out, what was it about him that made me think that he was part of that team? And I think it's because he carried himself like those guys from that golden era. He carried himself like a Derek Brooks or like the Rondé Barbers and, those guys. And he loved being a Buck. He was a team-first kind of guy. In fact, when you look at a lot of the stories surrounding Ernest Graham, a lot of them quote him as being one of their favorite people because of his team-first attitude. And guys, that goes to show exactly what I'm talking about. You see, I never really knew that about the guy, but because it was true about who he was as a person, it just came through. And you could feel it on him. You could just sense it on him that he was a Buccaneer through and through. And that's why he makes my number 2. I'm sorry, I did not mean for that to rhyme at all. All right, guys, and here we are rounding out the list. My number 1 pick for undrafted free agent top Buccaneer is a man that you may know by the name of Shelton Quarles. Quarles was the man, and he was a big, big, big part of that golden era of Buccaneer history. All right, so here's a few little stats. He came in 1997 and stayed until 2007, which isn't a bad run for an undrafted free agent. That's not a bad run at all. Now, I could sit here and read off to you all of his stats and talk about why he earns the spot, but I'm going to sum it up in 2 words. Super Bowl starter. Is that 3 words? I'm not sure. Super Bowl starter. Seriously, he went from an undrafted free agent to starting in the Super Bowl as middle linebacker. That is a hell of a climb. And that in and of itself would easily make my number one spot. But let me add on some extra credit to why he really, really seals this deal of making my number one spot for best undrafted free agent in the history of the Bucs. Since getting cut and released from the Bucs, the very next season, Shelton came back to the Bucs, not as a player, but to work in the front office, where he remains to this day. Currently, he is the director of football operations. Oh, wait, you don't know what that is? Let me school you a little bit. Here's what I found. I kind of was wondering what that particular position did, as I didn't know. And turns out you can't find the Bucs jobs descriptions on their website. So, I went out and I found what really a job description of a director of football operations does. And while it may be different for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because different organizations may use the same name to mean different things, here's what it says. It says, a director of football operations oversees all things scouting and makes recommendations to the GM regarding the draft and free agent signings. Which, again, I don't know if that's exactly what Shelton Quarles' job is, but if it is, that would make a whole lot of sense to what he's doing. Consider this. He was part of the scouting department of the Tampa Bay front office, and that's what he did before being promoted into this role. So to kind of be promoted to the boss of the department is a guy who's making his way up the ranks. Now, let me put that in another light just to make sure that you're catching it. What that means is, if I'm right, and that's what Shelton Quarles does, that means he is one of the men most responsible for helping Jason Licht with the draft. He is one of the men, or rather he is the man who is most responsible for finding players like Ali Marpet and Ryan Smith and the other undrafted free agents that make the list. He is the guy who is most responsible for sending out scouting reports on Jameis and researching Jameis Winston, and so that we know that we're picking the right franchise quarterback for our team. All of that is from a guy who came into the league not as some barnstormer, but as an undrafted free agent. And he's made one hell of an impact on the Buccaneers, and that's why Shelton Quarles is my number one pick for the top undrafted free agent to come in and make an impact. I got a couple honorable mentions I just want to throw out there. Do you know DeMar Dotson? Do you know he was an undrafted free agent? I didn't know that. There was Carl Williams who's out there, and there was Michael Bennett who's now playing with the Seahawks. So a couple honorable mentions in the middle of that. And guys, I tell you, I'd love to know how your picks stack up against mine. Did you have one that's on your list that I left off? Well, guys, why don't you let me know by sending me an email to thepewtercast@gmail.com, or you can hit me up on social media at thepewtercast. It's the same everywhere, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. Or you can leave a comment on the webpage where the podcast is broadcasting from over at pewtercast.libsyn.com. And that could be another way that we communicate back and forth. So yeah, guys, that'll do it and wrap up this segment right here. Still to come on the show, we're going to take a look at a couple of very fun articles that came out in these last couple of weeks concerning our Bucs with our segment Buck in the News. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
We call them cool, those hearts that have no scars to show, the ones that never do let go and risk the tables being turned. We call them fools who have to dance within the flame, who chance the sorrow and the shame that always comes with getting burned. But you got to be tough when consumed by desire, 'cause it's not enough just to stand outside the fire.
And welcome back to the final segment of the Pewtercast. I'm glad you guys are with me and that you've stayed with us through all of this. I got a couple of news articles that have really come out in this last week that I am excited and eager to kind of jump into. The first one that I see came out on NFL.com, where it was an article they were talking about how Dirk Cutter is going to have an in-game management coach, which I think is a real interesting thing. I didn't know that this was a thing. I didn't know that they had the ability to do something like this. but I thought that was a pretty good idea. These are guys that are just going to help Cutter out with so many, the different situations that they have, whether it's clock management or what's he supposed to do in the right game-ending situation. So what's going to happen there is our coach is going to have a coach. That's a cool idea. I love that idea. In fact, I really wish that Lovie Smith would have had his own game management coach. You know what I think that says about our coach, about Coach Cutter, is that he's humble. He's humble enough to sit there and go, you know what? Now, listen, Cutter would not be in that job as head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers if he didn't know a lot about coaching and he didn't know a lot about football. But he's able to say, hey, you know what? Here's a weak spot that I personally have, so let's shore that up a little bit. Or let's get some just added beef into that area. Here's something I've not had a ton of experience with, especially recently, on all sides of the field. He's had it for the offense, but on all sides, the defense and the offense. And so he's going to bring somebody in to help him figure that out. And I think that's just a great, very smart, very intelligent thing for him to do, and very smart way for him to go. So kudos to Coach Cutter. Can't wait to find out who this person is and what you're going to have. So we'll see that. On to another article of Buck in the News. This is one I think that kind of comes out just about every single year, where they say that Tampa Bay has once again been named a sleeper team in today's NFL. In fact, it says it's one of the rare sleeper teams, although I'm not really sure how rare it is, because as another article on BucksNation.com points out, that the Bucs are once again a sleeper pick for 2017. In fact, that particular article goes on to say that the Bucs have been named the sleeper pick of the year for several years in a row, which might be a little disappointing to you, because to read that we're the sleeper team of the year, and then turns out that, well, we've been that sleeper team for a lot of years, and what good's it really done us? Guys, I got to tell you, I don't want to be a sleeper team. I really don't. I want to be a team that is so damn good that the other teams see us coming. I want to be a team that is not a sleeper team, but is loud and proud and is out there. And people know that when they're going to play Tampa Bay, they're going to have a hell of a fight on their hands. And that's really what I'd like to see. However, I do think it'd be kind of cool if people, for this first year or two, they weren't really expecting much out of the Bucs. And so they just kind of thought, that'll be an easy game, and we go in and mop the floor with them. That's always a fun game to watch when you're a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. And I don't know. I'd really love to see that. All right, guys, I got one more news segment that came out that I really, really had to talk about today. This one comes out from SportsIllustrated.com or SI.com, where they are putting up a mock draft of 2017. Oh my God, people, seriously, we just got through with this mock draft. This season hasn't even started yet. The college season hasn't even started yet, and you're already putting together mock drafts for next year. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. That's all you have to do, is to stop it. But that's not the thing that made me so mad in this. They are projecting right now that Tampa Bay will have the number 6 pick in the 2017 draft. Are you kidding me? Are you full-on kidding me? First of all, there's no way you could know that. We could have the number 6 pick. We ain't gonna, but we could. I think it's more likely that we'll have the number 16 or the number 26 pick. I'd like the number 26 pick. I think that's pretty cool. I wouldn't mind the number 32 pick, to tell you the truth. But, I don't know. I mean, really, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers get such disrespect that for all the great moves that we have made in this offseason, they still think that we are going to wind up being the 6th worst team in the NFL. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Now, no, you can go to the SI.com website and they'll kind of say, hey, we're not really projecting that this is where the team is going to go, but, it's just kind of what we're thinking right now, and some team had to go somewhere, so don't get offended. Well, you know what? I got offended. I really did. Now, offense is one of those things you can choose, so I'm going to choose to not be offended. I'm going to choose to not let it eat me up inside. But you know what? Screw you guys. Bucs are going to be way better than a number 6 pick this year. And I can't wait for Jameis and Vernon and Mike Evans and all those guys to prove you guys wrong. All right, guys. Well, that is going to close up this particular segment of Buck in the News. And with that, it's actually going to wrap up episode number 2. Wow. It's 2 episodes in the can. You know, I feel like this was a good discussion. I think it was one that needed to be had, where we talked about what it means to change the culture of our team from a culture of losing to a culture of winning. This just felt like the right time to do it. And while we're still here early in the offseason, and, you know, I sincerely hope that the Bucks are on the same page, because it sure seems like they are. But let me say this. These principles that I talked about for creating a winning culture, these things that we went through, these had-to-haves that we went through, they're not limited to football. They will work in any organizational setting, I promise you. I am fully convinced of that. Culture is something that many businesses and nonprofits fail to take into account as long as their numbers are hitting. But the problem is so often they're hitting the wrong numbers, and they're not paying attention to even some of the underlying numbers that maybe won't necessarily impact the bottom line, at least not directly, but to any thinking person, they'll tell you, yeah, that's going to affect your bottom line, even if there's not a direct line to it. And guys, now that you know these principles, now that you've kind of gone through them with me, I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to become a change agent in whatever organization you found yourself in. Make the culture around you better. Culture is contagious, guys. Others will catch on. So you lead out in setting the bar. You lead out in rallying the troops. You lead out in finding new ways to win. You lead out in changing the culture of your job, your church, your family, your volunteer place, whatever place you find you're in. You lead out in changing the culture there from a culture of losing, if that's where you guys currently exist, into a culture of winning, or maybe a culture of winning more. You can actually do it if you guys will just step out and lead. Guys, I know you can do it. All right, guys, well, that's going to do it. I'll see you guys next time on the Pewtercast. Hey, be sure to look out for our very first bonus content episode coming very, very soon. And in the meantime, go Bucks.